Hey, I'm on summer break and I can't escape talking about history, and I want to talk about some medieval history, some of my favorite stuff. We get to tie in some literary history here too, and also I probably get to offend those of you that can speak French because my pronunciation is terrible, but I still want to address the Song of Roland or La Chanson de Roland. And this is a period of history where we're dealing with Charlemagne, Charles the Great, Carolus Magnus. And the Song of Roland, Le Chanson, is one of the most important works of medieval French literature because it turns a rather small historical event into this grand sweeping story, a song about loyalty and war, and also about Christian heroism. So the song, the poem, is usually dated around to the late 11th century CE, and it tells the story of Roland. He's a knight who happens to serve Charlemagne, who may have been his nephew, and Roland, spoiler alert here, dies in battle in the rear guard of the Frankish army, what would eventually become the French. And what makes the song historically interesting is that it's based loosely on a real event from 778 CE. And this is the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass. And this is when Charlemagne's rear guard was attacked in the Pyrenees, Los Pyreneos. And the poem, it actually transforms that episode, that little sliver of history, into something much larger. Not just a skirmish with the Basques of the region, but it's an epic struggle that takes place between Christians and Muslims. So, that difference between the Basques versus the Franks and Christians versus the Muslims is rather important because the poem really tells us more about the age that produced it more than an event it really remembers. And by the time La Chanson de Roland, or the Song of Roland, was actually written down, Europe was in the midst of the Crusades. We have those nine jaunty little events that take place between Christendom and Islam. And the poem itself reflects that world. It imagines warfare in sharp religious terms, and it presents Roland as this ideal feudal warrior. He's brave and loyal, he's proud, and he's also willing to die rather than fail his king, fail his emperor. So what's at the center of this story within the poem is the fact that Roland refuses to sound his horn, to blow into the horn known as Oliphant. And this lack of action really doesn't call back Charlemagne to come back and help. He's up front with the vanguard leading his army. And because Roland hesitates for honor, he actually puts himself and his men in great jeopardy. And that decision turns the battle into more of a heroic stand, and then it becomes a tragedy that's actually shaped by Roland's pride. This song, this poem, is also really important because it starts to help define the values of medieval epics. You have loyalty to one's lord, you have courage in battle, there's the need for vengeance, preserving honor, and religious devotion. And all of those things run through the chanson. And Roland has a companion in this poem, and his name is Oliver. And Oliver serves as kind of a contrast in the song. He's more prudent, he's more practical. And then there is the Archbishop Turpin, who gives the poem its strongly Christian kind of moral voice. So even though this poem is full of fighting and violence, it's really about a code, what it means to serve and to fight. Also, to die well. And then finally, to actually be remembered. And that's one reason why the poem, the Song of Roland, has lasted so long, because it gave medieval audiences a model of heroic identity that was both political and also spiritual. Another kind of interesting or cool aspect of the Song of Roland is the story of Roland and his sword, Durandal. Durandal is kind of a special legendary sword of Roland because it was seen to have kind of like, divine origins. It was either crafted by this mystical smith named Wayland, or it may have actually been gifted to Charlemagne by an angel. And in its hilt, its golden hilt, it contained a lot of relics like the tooth of St. Peter and the blood of St. Basil and the hair of Saint Denis and a piece of the Virgin Mary's clothing. It was seen to be very much like indestructible. Like, think Excalibur when you think about Durandal. And this gives another worldly or spiritual, mystical, almost fairy tale like component to the story as well. Okay, so I'm getting kind of wordy here, but why the Song of Roland? Why go back to this? Well, one, because I taught a European conflicts in European history class in high school for my high school a few years back, and so this story really kind of grabbed me, and it also I had a lot of fun with it back in college in my history classes there. But it does really stand at the beginning of a long literary tradition. So for me, it's a nice bridge between literature and history. And I kind of like finding ways to tie history in together with literature and also art. If you haven't seen my videos, you might kind of catch on to that. But it's one of the great Chanson de Geste, or it's a song of heroic deeds. And it really helps shape later medieval literature around things like worship and kingship and memory. And at the same time, it remains historically revealing because it shows how medieval Europe wanted to imagine its past. It was very simplified and moralized and just turned into epic example. And that's why the poem still matters. It's not just an old war story. It's really one of the clearest windows into how the medieval Western, civilization, how it really imagined heroism and faith, and also the meaning of sacrifice. And also, it's one of those cool things where you can find, with all the Tolkien and the George R. R. Martin stuff with Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and stuff, where people just had this really weird need to name their weapons, name their swords. Anywho, give it a shot. It's the national epic of France, and it's just a great tie to history. Thanks for watching.